Hello, and welcome to Objective Health. I'm your host, Tiffany, your maskless, faceless host, Tiffany. And joining me in our virtual studio from all around the planet, we have Doug, Elliot, and Erica.
Hello.
Hello.
And as always, keeping us organized in the background is Damien.
Hello.
So today, our topic is going to be Operation Warp Speed, or as we like to call it, Operation Warped Speed, because these people are absolutely nuts and they're sending us hurtling into an uncertain future where all of our rights will be taken away from us. Well, that's probably the one certainty. But at any rate, a couple of months ago, President Trump announced that there would be starting an operation called Operation Warp Speed. Um, the goal of this operation is to deliver 300 million doses of a COVID 19 vaccine by January of 2021. They want to quickly ramp up the production, organize distribution, and determine who gets the first doses of whatever vaccine or vaccines they choose to make available to the public. Um, Another objective, like a slower rollout, is to make 100 million doses of the vaccine available by this November, 200 million doses by December, and 300 million doses by January, which is a lot of doses.
Hmm.
What is the population of the US? Like 350
Something like
million
that.
people?
Yeah.
So basically, they're aiming to vaccinate pretty much every man, woman, and child in the country. Um, and like all other government operations throughout history, like say Operation Northwoods, Operation Paperclip, Operation Mockingbird, and I think
Hmm.
Israel had Operation Cast Lead. All these operations and projects never mean good things for the population at large. So we cannot expect anything good to come from this Operation Warp Speed. My first question is regarding this operation. Well, I have a couple of questions. Why is the military involved?
Mm.
And what exactly does delivery mean? Like, do we need delivery from the military? Like, do they mean the military is going to be involved in logistics and shipping these vaccines to health departments or hospitals or doctors' offices or whatever? Or does delivery mean
Forced.
delivering this injection directly into the arms of the people, whether they want them or not? What
Well,
do you
there,
guys think?
there are several players who have basically injected billions of dollars into this fast tracking of the vaccine, right? So not only have you had governments, but you've also had the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And
Mm,
so the idea is to get the vaccine what ordinarily would take sometimes years in terms of vaccine development to make sure that this thing is safe. You've had this fast track. There's lots of inherent problems with that. But I would imagine that if you have an organization or an institution like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who clearly have vested interests in having as many people as possible globally and also in the US being injected with this vaccine, then I would imagine that delivered is probably going to involve some kind of encouragement, if not
mm,
if not being outright forced onto people. And it,
mhm,
especially when you have the military involved, it could go either way, right? And
mhm,
it's not just like you're setting up free little tents in your neighborhood with happy nurses offering anyone to come into the tent and have their vaccine if they so please. When this is a military operation, I mean, what's the purpose of the
mhm,
military, right? These are going to be armed, they're going to be trained, And if they receive orders, they generally fulfill those orders. So I guess whether this is going to be forced on the people is going to depend on whether orders come on from up high as to whether they are essentially told to. The problem is, and I think the danger here, is that when you have the military involved, the military have guns, people are scared of the military. They could at any point quite easily force it onto large numbers of the population, and people would generally have little protection against that.
Well, I think it could be also a very sly way of getting the military onto the streets of America.
Interesting.
And maybe in a way, like asking the question was stupid, because it seems a little obvious to me that this is a war against the people. So in any war, you would need military involvement. So there you go. But speaking of Bill Gates, because you can't mention COVID-19 without mentioning Bill Gates. But we have Dr. Fauci, one of Bill Gates's besties, and we'll just play a little clip of him talking about Operation Warp Speed.
You know, I think there were some good intentions about using the word warp speed, but I myself flinched a little because I know that people might think it's reckless because it's warp speed. It isn't. There are risks, but the risks are all financial risks. And that's what people need to understand. They're not compromising the safety at all, nor is there compromise of scientific integrity. When you do a vaccine under non-emergent conditions, there are various steps. And because companies make investments in this, what they do is they don't make an investment in this step until they're pretty sure this step works. And then they go to the next step. And one of the most important steps is when you start gearing up to make many, many doses. You're not going to make an investment of $500 million or more to produce doses unless you know it works. So what this particular program says, we're going to assume it's going to work. So we're going to put investment in preparing the sites for a phase 3 even before we knew that the phase 1 was successful. We're going to be making doses even before we know it's effective. So what you're doing is you're cutting down on time, but you're not cutting down on the process of safety and science. So if you lose, the only thing you lose is a lot of money. Now, nobody likes to lose a lot of money, but we feel we'd rather lose a lot of money and gain 4, 5, 6, 7 months than have a result and have to wait 4, 5, 6, 7 months to get the vaccine.
Bullshit.
Whatever, Fauci.
Yeah, I was just going to say, on that note, like money, Americans are paying for this.
Yeah, that's our money that's being wasted.
80 million so far.
Well, it's even like on the face of it, that's not true. Like if you read about the different things that they're skipping in order to fast track this vaccine, one of them is animal trials, right? So they're skipping over the animal trials altogether and going straight to human trials. How is that not compromising safety?
Well, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
I don't know.
One of the concerning comments that he made, like this was going to be all financial risks, as if there's no risk at all to the people these vaccines are going to be injected into. But then he says, like, these researchers who are working on this vaccine start with the assumption that the vaccine is going to work. That's their big problem right there at the get-go, because you can't start with that assumption, because that colors everything that you do after that. Like, you think there's going to be some lone researcher that says, wait, look at this result that we got from one of these trials. Like, am I going to say something and compromise the entire operation, or am I just going to keep quiet and shove it under the rug?
Yeah, but if they've got good intentions, then that's all that matters, right?
Yeah, right.
It's okay to
They're
make
injecting
assumptions.
the intention into you.
Yeah, it's okay to make assumptions as long as you have good intentions. And if a couple people die, then that doesn't really matter, because as long as you had good intentions and what you wanted to happen you thought might happen. Even if it doesn't happen, then that's not really your responsibility, right? That's what people need to understand, is that these kind of players, they have our best interests at hand, and so we should we should listen to everything that they say and follow their orders.
Well, another thing that's interesting is that the at least in the U.S., that service members, the military, will be the first Americans to receive this vaccine. And it's kind of interesting to think about that, because enlisted soldiers actually don't have any rights to refuse vaccination based on philosophical or religious exemptions.
Yeah, they got rid of that in 1998, didn't they?
Yeah. So these basically, they're the guinea pigs. And for some of our listeners who may not have been old enough to remember the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, they did the exact same thing to the troops in the Gulf War. They became guinea pigs, received experimental vaccines such as anthrax and botulism, and they weren't approved by the FDA. And so they basically suffered pretty serious side effects, but neurological problems, bleeding, and it was a miserable, abysmal failure. But because they tested soldiers, they didn't really have to release that information. And, now there's a link, 20 plus years later, between squalene that they used in these vaccines and Gulf War syndrome. And there's a link if our listeners are interested. It's called Gulf War Syndrome, United States Veterans Suffering from Multiple Debilitating Symptoms. And that was Gary Null wrote about it. And it's quite interesting to go back and read, because you realize that the U.S. military will be the guinea pigs, and then they can say, well, see, these guys got it, so you can get it and it's safe.
And this has happened on multiple occasions before, right? There have been so many different incidents of vaccine injury, and I think it's particularly pertinent on this topic in the context of this Operation Warp Speed. It turns out that Operation Warp Speed, the guy who's been appointed to essentially direct this, he was appointed by Jared Kushner, which is Trump's son-in-law. But his name is Slaoui.
I don't know if you pronounce it that way.
Moncef Slaoui.
Moncef Slaoui, or however you pronounce it. He's Moroccan, born in the US, and so he's got a little bit of a shady history. He was
Just a little.
Shocking.
Indeed. From 2006 and to 2017, Slaoui was the chairman of the Global Research and Development and Vaccines at GlaxoSmithKline, major multinational pharmaceutical company, which we've spoken about many times. So he sat on the company's executive team and the board of directors. So this guy was pretty high up, and he had quite a bit of power at the company. So while he was at that company, he headed the development of a vaccine for HPV, which is the human papilloma virus related to cervical cancer. And that was called Cervarix. Okay. Now, this was tied to multiple deaths, crippling effects, neurological issues, long-term chronic health issues, complex regional pain syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome. Apparently, these side effects exceeded any other vaccine. Okay. And so they trialed this vaccine. They essentially were using this among Indian villages, and they were administering it to girls, and essentially using them as guinea pigs. The funders of the research which led to this vaccine was no other than the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So this Slaoui has several ties to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But essentially, there was a lot of shady business going on whilst he was kind of at the head of the vaccine development, and lots of side effects. And it actually turned out that it hadn't really been tested for safety. And so he's got a very poor track record in terms of creating a safe vaccine. And this is the guy that has been appointed to head the coronavirus vaccine development. So it's like,
He's the czar.
Yeah.
maybe this isn't a good idea. You know, maybe this is a bit of a stupid idea.
Well, he's got an even more checkered past too, because he also oversaw the development of the Pandemrix vaccine for the swine flu back in 2009, when everybody was shrieking about massive death tolls that never actually materialized, and that ended up giving people brain damage, like thousands of people, 80% of them children apparently. And the NHS is even still involved in lawsuits with their with some of their staff members who were injured by the vaccine. And of course, GlaxoSmithKline doesn't have to deal with any of that because they get indemnity from any kind of vaccine injury. So yeah, this guy, his track record is not great, to put it extremely mildly.
Well, he was on the board of directors at Moderna too, and Moderna, I don't think they've ever put out a vaccine until now, where they're trying to
No, they haven't.
put out a COVID vaccine. So they're one of the favorites to be at the top as far as this Operation Warp Speed goes. But Slaoui was on their board of directors at one point. And interestingly enough, Moderna has received over $20 million from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation over the years for research. So,
and $483 million in federal funding.
Yeah.
And this guy still holds $10 million worth of stocks in Moderna. So talk about
Nice.
conflict of interest, right?
Yeah.
You appoint a guy to basically, direct the operation of administering a vaccine en masse. And the guy has major investments in one of the main companies who are coming up with a vaccine and is likely going to profit significantly from that company's vaccine. I mean, how openly corrupt can you get?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, it's not even, this isn't even a secret. It's not even like a conspiracy theory. This is completely known. And yet no one is asking questions.
Yeah. Well, there was an article actually on RT called "Trump's Warp Speed Vaccine Czar Oversaw an Infamously Botched Vaccination. Wonder why a third of Americans want to dodge this one." And in it, it's written by a really good journalist, actually, Helen Buiniski, I think is how you pronounce her name. And kind of towards the end of the article, she quotes a tropical disease specialist named Peter Hotez, and he's actually one of the ones who worked on a vaccine for SARS, which actually got shelved because it didn't work. And he actually tested before Congress that the SARS vaccine effort ended badly for the experimental animals because basically they developed a condition called immune enhancement, which basically means that they actually develop an often fatal version of the disease that they're vaccinating against. So you're vaccinating against SARS, and the animals end up getting a bad version of SARS. And they quote him as saying, or she quotes him as saying, "I understand the importance of accelerating timelines for vaccines in general, but from everything I know, this is not the vaccine to be doing it with." That's something that was in a Reuters interview. And he says that the record for vaccine development is 4 years. So just to give you an idea of how much they're basically trying to increase the speed by, what would that be, 400%, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and the idea that they can do that safely and the only risk is a financial one, my BS detector is going off the charts right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is
Faster than the speed of light.
Yeah.
I mean, this is warp speed BS detector, right?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have to worry about these animals coming up with, super immune system problems because that whole step has been skipped.
Yeah.
They don't have to test it on animals. They're going straight to the human beings.
Yeah, I mean,
So that's great.
This is why it's so
Thanks
dangerous,
to that
right?
fast tracking designation, you know, I mean, create a pandemic and then provide the solution and force it on people, because now it's becoming, oh, well, you won't have to wear that pesky mask when the vaccine happens. You know what I mean?
And everything can open up again and we'll all be free.
This, when you're dealing with an mRNA vaccine, it's never been done.
Yeah.
So even if this was a normal vaccine, 1 year or 18 months is still too short, right? But this is a completely different animal. You're comparing apples and oranges. This is something that has never been done before. The potential for this to go wrong is so high, like unbelievably high. And there are so many dangers associated with this. It's sheer arrogance, it's sheer hubris, demonstrated by those such as Fauci and those who are directing this and are trying to convince the public that this is a good and a safe idea. And again, it's based on assumptions and it's based on supposedly good intentions. But I mean, yeah, there's just so many ways that this could go wrong. It boggles the mind how they're even able to go forth with this.
Well, another thing to consider is, I mean, if we assume that they didn't already have a vaccine just waiting in the pipeline for something like this to happen, if we take them at their word that they didn't, which I don't, I'm just guessing that they probably already had something. We have no idea what is really in here. I think they've been wanting to experiment with DNA or RNA vaccines for a very, very long time. They have all of this CRISPR technology that they can use and they want to put to use. And of course, there's a huge money-making scheme on their parts. But I think that all of this, like this whole waiting, this is warp speed. We'll try and get the vaccines out by the end of the year, the beginning of 2021. Let's hurry up and do this so we can all get back to normal. I think this is all just a big part of the whole COVID-19 vaccine theater that we're all being forced to watch and participate in, whether we want to or not. But really, I think the whole argument about, is this going to be safe or is it going to be tested enough? I think it's pretty much no point in arguing that because, in my opinion, all vaccines are crap. It doesn't matter how long it took for them to develop this particular vaccine, whether it took 4 months or 4 years or 10 years. No vaccines are safe and effective, and especially this one because it's an entirely new kind of mRNA vaccine. So, if they test it for a few months or a few years, it doesn't matter. They're not going to do any stringent trials. They're not going to do any controlled, what do they call it? The double-blind, controlled, randomized, controlled trials that they use for vaccines. They're not going to do that. So this whole argument is it going to be safe is just unnecessary. And this vaccine, out of all the vaccines that are crappy, I think this one is going to be like the worst vaccine ever.
And just incidentally, if people don't know, no, they've never tested an mRNA vaccine before, but they've also never tested a coronavirus vaccine in humans before. So they're there's a couple of different milestones they've decided to just jump straight to at this point with this one.
Yeah.
Well, and the interesting thing is too, just even calling it a vaccine, protects the pharmaceutical and biotech companies from any liabilities under the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. So they can basically experiment on everyone. And, if there's a bad side effect, well, they're not liable. Oh, well, I guess that didn't work. You know what I'm saying? So they basically are given free rein to use people's fear to experiment on them, starting with the U.S. military and then all the citizens. And then if something really bad happens, like you have an epidemic outbreak of autoimmune issues, which we already see in children, then they're not liable for it. Oh, so, well, I guess it didn't work. And they won't even come out and say that, we'll just, it's those anti-vaxxers are crazy. You know what I mean? They don't know what they're talking about. And so that is scary. Like if you or I were to do that as a business owner, we could spend the rest of our lives in jail and definitely not be able to run a business, but they have immunity. So why would they have a conscience about it? I mean, they're just going to move forward,
Yeah.
Because they know they're not going to get in trouble for it.
Exactly. And this is how they can come out with language like, we can assume it's safe and we intend that it will be safe and we have good intentions and all of this basically fluffy language, right? So that if things do go wrong, one, they have no liability. So they know for a fact that they do not have to pay for the consequences of their actions. They've got no skin in the game. And two, they can knowingly distribute a vaccine which they perhaps know is not safe for many people. And yet, if there are problems which crop up down the line, they can easily fall back on the, on the narrative of, oh, we made a mistake. We are sorry, but we had good intentions and we needed to get this out to keep everybody safe. And people will just buy that, right? And so, again, no skin in the game, no responsibility. They can do whatever they want and there are no consequences for their actions. Well,
it's like they do with the flu vaccine every year. Oops, sorry. This was actually the wrong strain of the flu vaccine that's in there versus the one that's going around transmitting from person to person. We made a mistake. We'll try and do better next year. But another thing to consider is, the COVID-19, I'm using quotations here, that is going around is obviously not deadly like they're saying. Like a bunch of old people died, but who's to say? They screw up the numbers so much. They're classifying everything as a COVID death. You can't trust anything they're saying. But what if they were to say, like once they start introducing this vaccine, they can say, oh, wow, the COVID-19 vaccine has mutated. This whole second wave that Bill Gates and everybody is talking about is supposed to be coming down the pipeline. The thing that's going on right now, this is probably just a trial run, just to see what they can get away with, see how many people they can force to wear masks and to quarantine themselves and just totally redo the fabric of society. But then when they introduce a vaccine, they could say that it mutated. They could say it's now deadly, which it will be. If all the ingredients that we read about are actually going to be in this vaccine and it's actually going to alter your DNA. A lot of people are going to be seriously harmed and a lot of people are probably going to die from this vaccine. But they could just say it mutated into a very bad strain. And there you go. They won't get in trouble anyway, no matter which way it goes. But we're the ones who are going to suffer.
Yeah.
But they'll make their money back.
And then some. A lot more, probably.
Yeah, that's really the most important thing, right? If they make the money back, if they consolidate power, then a couple of deaths, a couple of disabilities don't really matter in the big scheme of things, right?
No,
it's just the necessary collateral damage, right? Yeah. Because you have to achieve your goals and whatever unfortunate consequence some people will die, right? That's not a problem in these people's eyes. They don't really care about humans. They don't really care about human suffering. They don't really have the intention of improving the health in general of people. They are simply concerned with consolidating power, gaining more power, and that inevitably involves money. But there's also deeper aspects to that, right? And so, when you're dealing with people like that, and the majority of people cannot get their head around that kind of psychology, it's collectively it yields a situation where people are going to be susceptible to mass suffering on a wide scale.
Well, when you consider warp speed and what that actually means, it The implication is that you're going somewhere very fast. So these people are trying to warp speed us into a new world order.
Over a cliff.
They want it to happen. Yeah, they want it to happen as fast as possible. They want to consolidate and get that final grasp on power so they can, I don't know, create their heaven on earth, which will be hell on earth for everybody else. But yeah. So
one last thing, though, I'd like to remind our listeners is that back in 2010, Bill Gates called for the decade of vaccines. So they got to warp speed that vaccine before 2020 ends. Otherwise, his predicament,
they'll be off schedule.
Yeah, off schedule.
Yeah, the prediction that he is going to force into actually happening. Not quite a prediction. But at any rate, anybody else have anything to add before we wrap it up for today? Nope. Okay, so there it is, folks. Operation Warp Speed. We'll see what the final destination will be, as if we have any choice other than to look at it. Just keep your eyes open. And thanks for listening. Hit the like and subscribe if you feel the need to do so. And we will see you next time with a brand new show. Have a good day, everybody.
Excellent. Bye-bye.